Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week, US Senator Ron Wyden introduces a bill that would create a federal ban on intoxicating hemp products and put the FDA in charge of those regulations.
The Wyden bill, really monumental day yesterday, September 25th, for the hemp industry and the cannabis industry.
Kerry Hinkle was at that announcement in our nation's capital, but that group is also busy helping the hemp industry in California prepare a lawsuit to fight Governor Gavin Newsom's emergency executive order shutting down the intoxicating hemp market in that state. Plus, we talk with Aaron Smith, the executive director of the NCIA, about a combined effort to call for federal descheduling and a single federal regulatory agency for the same plant.
The industry is kind of pulling itself apart right now. And I'm hopeful that this legislation is something that, both sides of the industry can get behind.
And despite 24 legal adult use states, 38 decriminalized states, the FBI reports that there were still over 200,000 arrests for criminal possession of cannabis in the U.S. last year alone, and a 420 record at Hall of Flowers in California last weekend when Seth Rogen's Rolling Papers brand OCB created a simultaneous 420 sesh for over 7,000 people.
It's 420, y'all make some noise, let's go!
Yeah! All that and Coast to Coast Cannabis News on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto. Next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, Pro Cannabis Media's weekly roundup of the news from the industry. I'm Alaina Pinto. A reminder that if you want to follow this show, it's easiest if you download the free app PCM TV in the App Store and Google Play. Our lead story this week is the fight to regulate intoxicating hemp products in all states. That is now part of a bill in the US Senate introduced by Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. This comes in the same week that California Governor Gavin Newsom used his executive emergency privilege to prohibit all intoxicating hemp-derived products in his state. That has triggered the beginning of lawsuits against the state of California led by the hemp industry. Well, back to DC for details on the bill introduced in the Senate this week. Both the US Hemp Roundtable in Washington, D.C., and the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, worked together with Senator Wyden to create this bill. It's important to note that both billion-dollar industries have been waiting for some federal guidance on these products since the passing of the Farm Bill in 2018. That law basically legalized the cannabis sativa plant while using a definition of hemp that's under fire in federal courts. Over the past 6 years, there has been no guidance or federal regulations of the plant, and that has led to a mess of a conflict between federal and state laws. It also tried to put a wedge between the two sides of the emerging industry of hemp versus marijuana. PCM founder Jimmy Young talked to both sides of the cannabis industry, the one referred to as hemp and the other side referred to as marijuana. First up, Kerry Hinkle of the US Hemp Roundtable. He was at a luncheon with Senator Ron Wyden last week, and he recognizes the potential of this bill as the first step towards one set of rules for both industries.
The Wyden bill, really monumental day yesterday, September 25th, for the hemp industry and the cannabis industry. The bill is called the Cannabinoid Safety and Regulation Act. It's centered around a couple of pillars of any products that get any amounts of THC to can only be sold to adults 21 and over. There's some standardized in labeling, truth in labeling, meaning if it's got 100 milligrams on the label, that's what it's got in the package, some good manufacturing standards. There's some funding in the bill as well to study impairment driving. That was something Wyden's office was particularly bullish on. And in Oregon, they have married hemp and cannabis in a reasonable way there too. So he's got to represent both interests because they're both big business in his state. And we're really proud of that bill to have some kind of federal standardization. It's really important that NCIA was a co-sponsor or a supporter of that bill, and we have the 2-pager that we used in Capitol Hill all day yesterday with their logo front and center, along with about 30 other trade associations that say this is the industry coming together, hemp and cannabis, saying this is a federal pathway forward because it sets up a center for all cannabinoids. So in the eventual, whenever descheduling, rescheduling happens, the regulated licensed marijuana dispensary markets can now then fall under this program. So that's why we've carefully tried to do this in a way that sets up for long-term viability for both sides. And we're really proud of it.
A similar sentiment was echoed by the NCIA. Their executive director, Aaron Smith, who also talked to Jimmy about the potential to create federal guidelines for both uses of products derived from the cannabis sativa plant.
So it really kind of tries to level the playing field between state regulations and hemp for marijuana and hemp-derived cannabinoid products. And so to answer your question, I think it is a good thing for the industry to not have hemp products out there unregulated, being sold to anybody underage. And I should have mentioned that bill also would restrict the sales to minors. So yeah, it's a good thing.
But Aaron, it's 6 years too late. Or is it 6 years too late? In other words, shouldn't this have been done when the Farm Bill of 2018 passed at that time?
Yeah, certainly. It also bears to note that a more perfect bill would also just encompass all cannabinoids that would legalize marijuana-derived cannabinoids and regulate those products as well alongside the hemp-derived products. That's kind of the ultimate goal. This is clearly a political move, really, I think, to try to provide a alternative to the bans that are out there, the proposed bans. I think that they also recognize that they should have done this years ago and trying to come back and fix that.
Yeah, we call that a make good in the world of media. Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is unfortunate that the industry is kind of pulling itself apart right now, and I'm hopeful that this legislation is something that both sides of the industry can get behind.
And the people I talk to on both sides of this issue all say the same thing. We want control. We want regulation. We want guidelines. So it's not like either side of the industry is trying to pull a fast one as much as they're trying to work within rules and regulations that really haven't existed since that Farm Bill was passed in 2018, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the those on the state licensed cannabis side are for the most part putting up with overregulation at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pass these laws saying we're going to treat cannabis like alcohol. Turns out we're treating it much more strictly than alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And then the hemp comes along and it has effectively no rules. And so there's really a lack of parity there that is unacceptable. So really we need less regulation on the marijuana side and more on the hemp side, and try to find a middle ground there.
How about a one federal agency that just gives you the regulation rules for the plant, that it's the same plant. It's just has more THC, dry weight, 0.3% is the definition of hemp. We'll get into that in the next. But doesn't it make sense to have one federal regulatory board similar to the Alcohol and Beverage Commission that would just regulate this product?
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal.
and let that federal agency fight with the USAG, FDA, ABC, and all the other alphabet soup of bureaucracy that makes up our government.
And there'll always be a place for the states as well, but the problem is that the state systems are kind of wildly different. There's lack of uniformity.
The entire interview with Aaron and Jimmy will be available on our website and PCM TV app. As far as California is concerned, their governor, Gavin Newsom, used his executive emergency privilege to ban all cannabinoid-derived products in his state. Sure enough, many in the industry think he overstepped his authority, which means he is setting himself and his state up for a lawsuit or two. And the US Hemp Roundtable is already starting that process. And it's not that simple in the state of California.
We have been working really hard on a lawsuit now. So we filed a complaint on Tuesday evening. I'm catching up to speed how of a mess California actually is. So when we filed on Tuesday night, in other states, you would immediately get a file number, and then you'd be able to place a temporary restraining order. Apparently in California, because nothing's easy in California, it's not that simple. And so there's a court that has to approve before you can get a file number. So, we have reporters asking us questions on when's it been filed? Is there going to be a temporary restraining order yet? We have companies in California that are unsure if they can continue to sell the products that they're trying to sell right now, because there's this gray area for a couple of days before we can try to place this injunction on the emergency regulation. So it's a mess.
Our California reporter is Lisa Battista, who is involved with the Flavor Co., a CBD company, and she explains the impact of the governor's ban on her company.
This is Lisa Battista from the Flavor Co. As a hemp-derived manufacturer registered and compliant under AB 45, we absolutely support common sense regulations. However, we've been a good corporate citizen, playing by a set of rules to manufacture high-quality hemp-derived products, and the ban from Governor Newsom literally pulls the rug out from under us and all the other compliant manufacturers in the state, making it nearly impossible to do business. Products must have zero detectable THC, which means full-spectrum CBD is out of the question, and serving sizes are limited to 5 per package. As we read the rules, we cannot even advertise our services to companies in states where hemp is legal, let alone manufacture products. Of course, there's a lot of ambiguity and conflicting statements in the rules, and no clarifications or explanations have been provided by the state. Add to this the impact on consumers. There are already countless stories on social media from parents who rely on full-spectrum CBD products for their children, and this represents just a small portion of the many, many people impacted. As a company dealing with the heavy-handed approach from Governor Newsom, we've made the decision to exit California, taking all our hemp-derived manufacturing out of state, and we will not be renewing under AB 45. With that in mind, the ban is not only causing losses to small businesses and consumers, but also adding financial losses to a state already having financial difficulties. We can only hope common sense prevails before more companies and more consumers have to make these tough decisions.
A few more notes on California. Pesticides in products and inaccurate testing lab results continue to wreak havoc in the nation's #1 cannabis market. The state regulatory board revoked the license from Verity in San Diego this past week, and that lab becomes the 4th lab testing company to lose its license. Now, the LA County Board of Supervisors is asking social media platforms, including Yelp and Google, to deplatform listings of illegal and unlicensed cannabis companies. Well, back here on the East Coast, one state continues to grow. Maryland set a sales record in August. Plus, the FBI reports that law enforcement officers in the U.S. have made over 200,000 arrests in 2023 for low-level cannabis possession violations. Here's Andrew Behringer.
I'm Andrew Behringer with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The upcoming 2024 elections are indeed around the corner, but the cannabis rescheduling process seems to have been swept under the rug, even with law enforcement officials making over 200,000 cannabis-related arrests in 2023. The next hearing for the rescheduling of cannabis is scheduled for December 2nd. While we wait for the hearing to happen, things seem to still be moving in the background. The DEA has taken a significant step that could pave the way for cannabis reform. In a recent ruling, the agency acknowledged a new 2-part test for determining a substance's medical value, potentially simplifying the process of rescheduling cannabis. This new test, proposed by the Department of Health and Human Services, focuses on 2 key factors: widespread current medical use by licensed healthcare providers and credible scientific support for at least one medical condition. The DEA's acceptance of this new methodology comes as the agency has been deliberating on cannabis rescheduling for months. This development follows the Department of Justice's earlier criticism of the DEA's previous 5-part test as too narrow. The new streamlined approach could make it easier for cannabis to meet the criteria for rescheduling for cannabis reform. Please stay tuned for those updates coming soon. Now, in a local neighbor Maryland news, Maryland cannabis market is showing strong growth, with August sales topping $100 million in sales, according to the Maryland Cannabis Administration. This includes $73 million in recreational sales and $27 million in medical cannabis sales. The state is on track to surpass its very impressive first year of sales of $1.1 billion, which began in July of 2023. So far in 2024, dispensaries have sold $755 million worth of cannabis products, with the average flower price being around $9.50. Total sales since the market's launch have now reached $1.3 billion, while monthly sales consistently exceed $90 million a month. The state comptroller reports a 52% increase in tax collections from the first to the second quarter, reaching $22.3 million. Comptroller Brooke Learman highlighted the market's positive impact, stating the cannabis industry continues to create new jobs, investments, and opportunities, particularly marginalized areas affected by economic outcomes. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Behringer, reporting from the White House and our Capitol. I'll see you next week.
Next up, our state reports, and this week we start in Virginia with Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection, and this is the Virginia Cannabis Report on Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I would like to wish everyone that helped make last week's events a success a happy Black Cannabis Week. The Diasporic Alliance of Cannabis Opportunities, or DACO, was founded by Sharon Perry Thomas, and for 6 years has held Black Cannabis Week to honor the achievements of Black entrepreneurs and other important people in the cannabis community. Her vision to empower the communities that have been the most adversely affected by the failed war on drugs has grown to a now annual week-long celebration. This year was no different, with 4 major events that featured over 30 speakers, cannabis executives, elected officials, policymakers, and many more. The events included the Policy Breakfast, Blaze the Runway, the Rooted in Justice Film Festival, and the Daily Dose Tour. Virginia's own Marijuana Justice was proud to help kick off the Daily Dose Tour on the 22nd in Richmond, Virginia. The tour then went on to Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, and ended in New Jersey. The stops on the tour were areas that were some of the worst affected by the Reagan and Bush era's war on drugs. Each stop focused on different topics of conversation and partnerships with awesome equity-based groups such as at THC Justice Now, at Life After Release, and many more. Thanks again to all the people that made this year's Black Cannabis Week a week to remember, and to the awesome women that started it all. Well, that's going to do it for this week from the Virginia Cannabis Connection and reporting from Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
That'll do it for the A block, but we have more state reports coming up in the B block, plus a story of a major fine by the SEC on former Weed Maps executives, including one who was interviewed on Pro Cannabis Media back in 2021 when Chris Beals was the CEO. All that and more coming up after this on Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
See you again, Jimmy. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
Yeah, it's a great question because cannabis is very exciting. It's almost like, mom and pop drugstores. You could start whatever you wanted. You could be pretty successful. And then there are the business people who see the revenue potential. And those are the ones that I think that are going to become the buyers going forward. And then smaller companies will be the sellers. And then there'll be another group of like, what the heck happened? And there'll probably be some craft survivors as well. But I think, the access to capital and business, this is becoming a mature business, just like craft beer or the car industry from, the 1910s to today.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Welcome back. Hi, everyone. It is the B block now of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, and I'm Alaina Pinto. You might remember that when the state of Oklahoma opened up its cannabis licensing process in 2018 and eventually awarded over 4,700 licenses, the application fee was only $2,500 because the state wanted to make it easier for anyone to become a licensed grower or seller. Well, now, after hundreds of failures, many states point to Oklahoma as the perfect example of why oversaturation of licenses is not a good business practice, to say the least. New Mexico is now going through their own growing pains with as many as 1,000 licenses being issued since adult use started 2 years ago. The result is that the original medical operators like Minerva Canna and Ultra Health, who have been operating since the beginning of the medical market 10 years ago, are closing their doors since the majority of the market is now being dominated by the adult use consumers. While many of the New Mexico operators point their blame fingers on the regulators, perhaps the biggest reason for failure is based more on the limitations on marketing and educational messages, which have not led to any growth in the total market, and it just killed the medical operations. So, while some states thrive, most suffer as states move from medical only to adult use. Arizona was one of the first states to offer adult use licenses to their existing medical licensees, and that state continues to grow. And now a Scottsdale CBD company is cutting a deal with Walmart. Here is Karen Black with this week's Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. First up, CBD Life Sciences in Scottsdale announced a big partnership with Walmart. Their innovative products, including Nano CBD Coffee Creamer and CBD Pain Cream, will soon be available on Walmart Marketplace. The deal could significantly increase their brand visibility to over 120 million monthly Walmart visitors and potentially boost their annual sales by 35%. That would be on top of the 1,400% revenue increase the company has achieved since February of this year. Kudos all around. More good news. Arizona Natural Concepts, or ANC, is gearing up to launch a cannabis delivery service in January 2025. The company, which has several medical and adult use dispensaries in the Phoenix metro and surrounding areas, promises to bring you top-notch cannabis products whether you're at work, home, or play, as long as you're 21 or older and have a valid ID. But there's a catch. They can't deliver to hospitals or state parks. Go figure. Scottsdale-based Zone Properties just closed on a real estate deal in Surprise, Arizona for about $1.6 million. The site will become a new dispensary for Sunday Goods, its fourth in the Grand Canyon state. The deal is pushing the cannabis real estate powerhouse's rental revenue up to $3 million per year. Lastly, some Arizona cannabis executives gathered for an invitation-only dinner Thursday night in Phoenix. Interestingly, the event was sponsored by two telecommunications companies, perhaps signaling the industry's increasing dependence on technology or its growing acceptance as a real business segment. That's all for the Arizona Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Ohio continues to sell an enormous amount of cannabis now that their adult use market is open, but the total sales number is now more than 60 million in just under 2 months. But all is not entirely rosy in the Buckeye State as early market growing pains and town battles continue, as Christina Brisson reports in her Ohio Cannabis Report, now sponsored by Yellow Labs and available in over 40 dispensaries in that state alone.
In serene Springfield, Ohio, Ethan battles anxiety and persistent body pain. Seeking relief, he turns to Yellow Labs' Calm THC cream, offering tranquility via delivery technology. Massaging in the cream, Ethan feels waves of peace and serenity easing his anxiety and tension. Empowered by the remarkable relief, he sets out on a journey towards healing and renewal. Drawn to Yellow Lab's transformative offerings, the Calm THC cream becomes a beacon of comfort, soothing both his physical and emotional pain.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Well, football season is upon us, as I'm sure everyone's aware, and here in Columbus we are very dedicated to our Ohio State Buckeyes. So the Ohio Division of Cannabis Control wants to remind you that a non-medical use in public places is a minor misdemeanor and is prohibited to those under the age of 21. But speaking of those rules, I did want to touch base real quick on how they're not keeping us informed. If you go to the Ohio Division of Cannabis Control website and you go to the non-medical use fact, where you would obviously go to find answers to questions, right? If you go to that page and then you scroll down, there's a whole section for how do I stay up to date? And there's a whole click here button to make it easy and convenient. Well, let me tell you, it does not help you stay informed. When you click that here button, it takes you to the homepage of the Ohio Department of Commerce. Certainly not telling us anything about what is and isn't allowed, but we're going to go more into that later. Quick update on sales. As of September 14th, we're at 65 million, still going strong. And speaking of sales, we're welcoming a new dispensary to town. Reynoldsburg, who voted 64% to legalize, and who preemptively prepared in 2020 with new zoning laws to allow for non-medical cannabis use businesses, is opening their new location with certified cultivators on Livingston Avenue. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Delaware, on September 9th, in a 5-2 vote, has decided to impose a 6-month moratorium. But one councilwoman who voted in favor of not having a moratorium, Corey Hoffman, said, "I don't think we need any moratorium at this point. The state of Ohio is granting licenses, so okay, come do business in Delaware." I say smart man, because in Hubbard, where they've imposed their moratorium, they're losing all their sales to next door Warren and Youngstown. This is your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report. I am Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations and Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Have a great week.
The Ohio Cannabis Report is supported by Yellow Labs and BetterWaysToTHC.com. Search for Yellow Labs near me and find one of 40 dispensaries in Ohio carrying these amazing mists and creams.
Next door to Ohio is Michigan. And while many economic experts predicted that when the Buckeye State opened its doors to adult use sales, Michigan sales would suffer. So what do we think the impact of the first 7 weeks of sales in Ohio have done to Michigan? If you can believe it, sales have gone up. Prices are lower and inventory is higher in Michigan. And not surprisingly, so are the sales. In other states' news, Green State is making transactions easier for many cannabis companies, and now they have extended their services for the growing indigenous communities. Here's Tina Tasaka in Nevada.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. GreenCheck has introduced new banking services to licensed cannabis-related businesses operating on indigenous lands. This addresses a long-standing gap in financial services for cannabis businesses with tribal licenses, which have increased by 25% since January 2023. Historically, state licensing rules made it difficult for financial institutions to serve businesses on sovereign land. GreenCheck's platform now enables seamless onboarding for these cannabis-related businesses with future updates to include comprehensive regulatory rules. The Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association collaborated on this expansion, aiming to empower Indigenous communities through policy and outreach. The Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board has released revenue reports authorized by consulting firm TPMA regarding Nevada's cannabis market. According to greenmarketreport.com, dated September 25th, 2024. To summarize the findings, Nevada's cannabis market has seen a significant decline, with sales dropping from a peak of $95 million in April 2021 to around $68 million as of September 2023. A new state report predicts this downturn will reverse by 2030, driven by growth in the legal market and shrinking illicit market, currently valued between $242 million and $370 million. That's a big gap. Legal cannabis sales in Nevada reached $862 million in 2022, but the market still struggles with competition from illegal sales. Despite a 12% drop in licensed businesses, cannabis production surged in 2022 and 23, with monthly harvests nearly double those of previous years. Annual demand is estimated at 3.2 to 4.4 million pounds. Retail dispensaries increased from 84 in 2021 to 100 in 2023. And while growth is projected, federal marijuana rescheduling won't immediately create a national market. That's it for the national highlights Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Hey, welcome to New Jersey's Coast to Coast Cannabis News. I'm Jill Goldsberry with the news in New Jersey. And here's what's happening. I have an update, a very special update on the case that we've been following with the 3 officers out of New Jersey's Jersey City area that were fired. They're called the cannabis cops now because they were fired for lawful cannabis use under the guise of PREMA, where they are allowed to use cannabis responsibly, off duty, obviously, and purchased from a legal dispensary. Veteran owned, even better. So the 3 officers, big news this week, the 3 officers have been reinstated according to the latest news in NJ.com. Officer Palenko, Officer Manson, and Officer Riley were reinstated this week. However, the reinstatement comes at a condition. They are no longer allowed to carry weapons as of right now. And I have had a brief conversation with their attorney, Michael Rubis, who's giving me a little bit of the inside scoop. And we're looking to have him or one of the officers on the news very soon. So expect some new conversation on that. And so I'm very excited for them. They have been reinstated. They were told to report to work this week, and they are, as I said, they're not allowed to carry weapons as of yet. In other news, we have Doobie's new dispensary in West Milford opening this weekend.
How do you feel about the cannabis rollout in New Jersey? What do you think could be different, better?
I think that it's growing so quickly, and I think that everyone just needs to be ready to take opportunities and adapt to whatever's being thrown at them. I think something that we can definitely work on is packaging. I think that there's a lot of waste in packaging, so I think New Jersey can really focus on getting something a little bit more biodegradable or something just more earth-friendly.
Interesting. Okay, so sustainability is what you're concerned about right now.
Absolutely.
One of the things. Okay, I love that. Okay, thank you so much for that. And then, so how are you doing at NECAN? Are you having a good time?
NECAN's great. It's fun to see everybody. It's a big community in New Jersey right now because everything's still so small. Everyone kind of knows everyone or knows someone who knows everyone. So it's a lot of fun getting to put names to faces and just kind of all being in the same room. It's like a big friend reunion.
Yeah, and I know like you and I were talking, so now we finally meet in person. Yeah. It's like meeting people in real life. I know your dispensary's opening soon. Tell us, I know you're planning something big, so tell us about that.
Absolutely. We have a few big events coming up. We're in our soft opening now, so you can still come. But we're going to be at the Autumn Lights Festival in West Milford, September 27th, 28th, and 29th. We have a big VIP tent. We're going to have a bunch of brands there. They'll be giving out like swag and a lot of cool stuff. There's going to be entertainment entertainment. And then the following weekend, October 5th, is going to be Doobie's official big grand opening. So we'll have a bunch of brands there. We'll have entertainment, DJs, food trucks, you name it. It's going to be the party of the year.
All right. Yeah, I know there's an amusement park as well that's rumored to be.
Yeah, there's going to be a carnival at Autumn Lights Festival, so you'll see all of that. There's going to be like over 75 food trucks, and bajillion vendors. It's all going to be just a big old party in September and October in West Milford.
All right. So West Milford, people in West Milford, come out end of September, early October. If you're in the area, come through to Doobie's. And lastly, if you're in New Jersey, in the Hudson County area, you probably heard about Al Harrington's Viola Village opening in Hoboken. It was a big to-do. Lots of people came out, and so that is open. Hoboken now has an official dispensary that is celebrity owned. So we'll see how that works out there in Hoboken, New Jersey. I am Jill Goldsberry with New Jersey's Coast to Coast Cannabis News.
Okay, that'll do it for the B block, but we will go back to the West Coast next and check out our international block of cannabis news when Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues, plus a flashback to last week's Hall of Flowers where a record was set at 4:20 in the afternoon. Don't go away.
It's 4:20, y'all make some noise, let's go!
Yeah! Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants deserve the best.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. The guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind.
Welcome back to the C block, or final section of Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. A reminder that the best way to follow our weekly reports is to download our PCMTV app from the App Store or Google Play. And you can sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter on our website, procannabismedia.com. First up, A trip to the left coast as we check in on Matthew Friedlander in Washington State and Marianne Kersagi in Oregon.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with the Oregon Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The news out of Oregon this week is of another large entity going into receivership. Last year, publicly traded Chalice entered receivership. Their assets were sold and are now operating again. Now, Tumalo Industries, which operates 5 dispensaries, 2 cultivation facilities, and an extraction center with a number of brands, including the renowned Dr. Jolly's, has entered receivership. The public news is that operations are continuing and debts will be honored. I hope that they're able to turn things around and both investors and vendors are made whole. That's the Oregon Cannabis Report. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Coast to Coast News.
Hi, I'm Matthew Friedlander, coming to you from the owner's office here at Skagit Organics with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Coast to Coast Cannabis. Today I'm going to touch on the Blake Refund Bureau and give you a quick recap of the ADAI symposium that happened last week. So the Blake Refund Bureau came out of the Blake decision, which is a Washington State Supreme Court decision from 2021 that deemed the laws here in Washington that criminalized drugs to be unconstitutional. So what that means is that many people dating back to as far as the early 70s are eligible to have their drug convictions expunged from their records, and some of them may also be eligible for a refund due to the financial hardships that were imposed upon them during that process. So good news there. If you're in Washington, I highly recommend you go online and search for the Blake Refund Bureau, see if you are eligible to have your record expunged and possibly get a small refund from the state. At the Cannabis Alliance, we created some pamphlets to help spread the word about this program. We teamed up with Terpene Transit. They are a licensed transportation company here in the state to distribute these pamphlets to the retail stores to make sure as many people as possible know about the Blake Refund Bureau. ADAI had their symposium last week. The Alcohol, Drugs, and Addiction Institute. As expected, the narrative here continues to be about high-potency cannabis and psychosis. So as much as people in the prevention community would like the science to prove that cannabis causes psychosis, that is not what the cannabis science currently shows. What it does seem to indicate is that cannabis actually can be used as an early warning for people who are prone or predisposed to psychotic conditions. The science seems to indicate that if one of your early cannabis experiences did not go so well and you had something that could be considered a psychotic episode, there is evidence that you may later in life be predisposed to developing these types of conditions. So kind of an interesting twist there. Cannabis is not a cause of these problems, but actually can be something to help people get an early handle on dealing with these issues. The only other thing I want to talk about is the Cannabis Alliance will be having a virtual town hall about the intersection of cannabis and hemp. And we will be discussing how these two industries could and should be integrated into one. So that's what I've got for you out of Washington State for Coast to Coast Cannabis. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Next up is Colorado, where OSHA is offering free safety inspection services for cannabis companies with under 250 employees. Plus, Xavier Gillet analyzes the proposed Wyden bill on regulating intoxicating hemp products.
This is Xavier Gillet with the Colorado segment for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. For those that don't know me, I am the Colorado director of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a non-attorney professional at the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And I've got one story to share to our listeners and our viewers today as it relates to Colorado, and it's actually covering an offer from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, a federal agency, to state licensed cannabis businesses here in Colorado to come in and provide, an inspection, an audit, and some form of workplace safety oversight For those that don't know, OSHA, as the agency is referred to, enforces laws and rules and regulations related to workplace safety, primarily to protect the health and well-being of employees, especially in hazardous workplaces. And so OSHA has apparently taken an interest in the marijuana and cannabis industry because of unfortunate issues that we've seen arise in certain cannabis facilities. Top of mind, of course, being the fatality, the death that was experienced in Massachusetts due to an employee's respiratory issues and complications resulting from inhaling too much cannabis dust during a flower processing process. And so the offer by OSHA to come into facilities here in Colorado and provide oversight, suggestions, inspections, corrective measures to those businesses to ensure greater workplace safety, especially for, let's say, marijuana businesses like cultivators that do require the handling of potentially hazardous materials like pesticides. Now, this is interesting because, of course, marijuana is still a Schedule I substance at the federal level, and while that may be changing in the future, as of now, the offer by a federal agency, which, for those that think about it a little bit further, means that the expenditure of federal funds to assist or enforce cannabis businesses here is interesting. It's an interesting departure from what the federal government has done in the past. And the fact that OSHA is willing to recognize these businesses as legitimate businesses, and more importantly, recognize the employees of the businesses as legitimate employees, means that those employees, and in turn those businesses, will be subject to the requirements that OSHA imposes on employers across the nation, regardless of the industry they are participating in. Now, the one caveat to accepting, let's say, an audit or working with OSHA through this program is, of course, that the cannabis business, once it has opened the doors to OSHA, will be subject to compliance with the requirements and the changes and the suggestions that OSHA makes during those inspections. So inspectors will come into a facility. They may or may not issue recommendations for change, but if they do issue recommendations for change, the business had better be sure to comply with those recommendations. That's it for this week, and I'm looking forward to coming at you next week with some more news.
Now we turn to the state of Florida, where many residents had to flee their homes when Hurricane Helene made landfall on the west coast of that state. And yes, our own Jeff Aker had to evacuate for safety, but he's back and has his eyes on his Governor Ron DeSantis, who continues to rattle his sword fighting the Yes on 3 for adult use movement. And now he's causing a rift in his own Republican Party. Here's Jeff Aker with more.
Hi, I'm Jeff Aker, Master Gardener from Florida, with your cannabis report for Coast to Coast News. Just got through the hurricane, okay? A lot of Floridians are suffering right now, so keep us in your prayers. On the cannabis front, Ron DeSantis just put out that PSA about increasing accidents with cannabis legalization in America. Research has shown that, yes, indeed, there is a rise in accidents when recreational is enacted in a state. But with that being said, alcohol use has been shown in states that legalize weed to go down. So my thoughts are, when that goes down, the alcohol rates are going to be a little less. So it might wash out. And that being said, again, we sell beer in gas stations, grocery stores. You go into a Circle K, there's an ice cooler of beer right as you walk in the door. It seems kind of silly that he's worried about a 12. I think its average is about 6 to 12%. There's a lot of money being thrown at this. That PSA came out of our account. There's been like $90 million for the legalization, a large part of that given to by the hemp and some big donors. There's been $105 million on the plus, so a ton, record money going towards this legalization. This week we've had some people come out and support 3, what Donald Trump did. Ricky Williams, the running back for Miami Dolphins, did. Calvin Johnson, the wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, lives in Florida. He's going to support it. It's being heavily supported and funded. Is it a perfect bill? No. You know, it's a line item bill. I had somebody in the comments last week say he's not going to vote for it because it doesn't have a home grow. Well, it's so hard to get it to this point where we can vote on it. It costs so much money, as you can see, to get it on the vote, that we can change it after. It's easy to change it after. We can work on it after. They can build it after we say yes. They can build a system. And we'll see how they build the system. So, but the first step is getting it approved. On my way to work, I'm seeing several say yes on 3 signs. True Leaf is giving those signs out. Let's get the word out. Tell your friends, neighbors. Let's say yes on 3 and get this behind us. It's really, honestly, it's hurting Ron DeSantis's public rating, his negative stance. I want to see 70%, 75% say yes. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to keep pushing it. I'm going to keep covering the news for you. Keep tuned. Come back. Leave a comment if you want. There's something you want me to address. Something you know, something I need to know, or something that I'm not covering. I'm Jeff from Florida. Survived the hurricane. I'm still here.
The publicly traded stocks in the cannabis space have to be very careful with their reports since they are on doubly difficult regulations from the states they are based in and the SEC that monitors all public companies. One of the biggest companies in the publicly traded space is Weedmaps. That company is still a strong number 2 website for traffic, especially when people search for weed near me. There has been a few instances where Weedmaps has taken heat and fines for posting locations of illegal and unlicensed locations that are selling cannabis. This time, though, the SEC made their fines personal for some former executives of that company, as our man who is high on Wall Street, Doug Miller, reports.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Weedmaps has agreed to pay the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission $1.5 million to settle a cease and desist order from the agency that alleged several security violations, particularly that the company misled investors on how many monthly users were actually using its website in 2021 and 2022. According to an order from the SEC, the cannabis advertising giant issued untrue and misleading monthly active user MAU metrics during quarterly reports and earnings calls between when it went public in June 21st and late 2022. The SEC charged that Weedmaps executives padded the user stats to bolster its apparent performance to investors. The company's former CEO, Chris Beals, and former CFO, Arden Lee, both misled securities regulators and investors on strength of its MAU numbers. Weedmaps has struggled financially since its public debut. The company posted net income of $152.2 million in 2021, but then an $82.7 million loss in 2022, and then they lost another $15.7 million in 2023. Let's see how the stock chart looks. It's trading around 90 cents and it's pulling back at the moment. So watch for it to hit that bottom and set back up again, and it will run. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast, I'm Doug Miller.
This is Debbie Facey with the Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis News Report. what we have in Canada this week is, I would say, our larger story is the inspections that they did over the official year of 2023 to 2024, and that had risen from their prior years. They did a total of 662 stores. Within those stores, they did an overall of Ontario, British Columbia, and British Columbia and Ontario. So we had 74 stores in British Columbia, and we had 63 stores in Ontario. 29 stores, though, were revoked from their registration, as well as 243 adapted penalties. Their penalties were due to a lot of their compliances, a lot of their promotional, a lot of their maintenance, and a lot of their monitoring of their actual facilities. And this is something that needs to be, I want to say, diligent. It's important to make sure that not only is your facility up to par, but it is up to code every year, because you don't want to be having any sort of penalty, and you also don't want to be losing your license. So for Canada this week, I found this was the most important story, especially to implement the importance of having your facility clean, up to par, and up to code. This is Debbie Facey with your Canadian Coast to Coast Cannabis Report. Peace.
And finally tonight, a flashback to the Hall of Flowers trade show and celebration in Santa Cruz last weekend. Seth Rogen's rolling paper brand OCB was involved with the promotion of a simultaneous celebration of 420 in the afternoon, when an estimated 7,000 attendees fired up all at once. PCMTV's Eric Williamson was there for his group meetup and shared video of that moment.
It's 420, y'all make some noise, let's go! Yeah! We smoking with the legend Khalifa, let's go!
Of course, now that the unofficial record is established, you have to wonder when some other savvy marketer or trade show or concert venue will try to break that record. But for now, OCB's rolling papers that Seth Rogen is involved with holds that record and established the mark. One more reminder, you can take a shot of the QR code on the screen that will take you to the App Store or Google Play, so you can download the PCMTV app and get direct on-demand access to this news show and another 50 programs produced by Pro Cannabis Media over the past few years. I'm Alaina Pinto. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, and we'll see you next time.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.